Okay, it's 12 o'clock now, so I'm going to get started. My name is Isabel. If I haven't met you before, I'm from the Michelson Found Animals team, and I'm just going to do a quick intro before we get started on our webinar. So thank you again for joining. This is our Michelson Found Animals 101 for pet care startups. And we're so lucky to have Aimee Gilbreath, our executive director, here today to explain our organization and go into more depth about everything that this very wide-ranging nonprofit works on in LA and nationally. And just a little bit of a background on the call. So it's going to be about a 30-minute presentation followed by 15 to 30 minutes of Q&A. You can ask questions anytime in the chat window, or you can chime in at the end. You're going to be muted the entire time just to avoid any background noise. And this is being recorded, so we'll post it on our YouTube channel after if you want to share it with anyone who wasn't able to join today. And a little bit about Leap Ventures. So Leap Ventures was started due to noticing that there was an underinvestment in the rise of pet care startups and wanting to support all of the new founders. And so this Leap Ventures is one of the first programs designed to ignite meaningful growth across the pet care startup ecosystem. It is a partnership between Michelson Found Animals, which you'll be learning more about today, and Kinship, which is a division of Mars Pet Care. And the two programs within Leap Ventures, the first one is Leap Venture Academy, which is hosting the webinar you're joining today. We host informational and educational webinars about 2 to 3 times per month. We also host pitch competitions at major conferences. We have meetups at those conferences for you to meet fellow founders in person. We hosted a boot camp last fall for female founders, and we'll be announcing similar programs later this year. As well as access to mentors, advisors, funding. We have a large Slack channel to keep building partnerships and connections, and we're always happy to help and support any startups in our ecosystem, and these are all free programs. Our other program is the Leap Venture Studio, and we have one cohort per year of 6 to 8 startups. You can get up to $200,000 in funding. There's 3 months of programming 3 of the weeks are in person in LA and 2 weeks in New York City. We're in the middle of our 3rd cohort. We just announced the companies a few weeks ago, and the applications for the studio open in the fall. And if you have any other questions, comments, feedback, please feel free to email us at leapventurestudio@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter and LinkedIn if you want to get updates on upcoming webinars and other events. And if you haven't already joined our Slack channel, I highly recommend starting there, and I'll post that link in the chat box towards the end of the call. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Aimee.
Great. Okay, so hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm going to share my screen with you. Let's see. Oh boy. Okay, hang on one second, you guys. I may have to download this presentation to make this work. All right, so Michelson Found Animals, while I get this going for you, is definitely, all puns intended, an odd beast. So in the realm of nonprofit and social enterprise and pets, we are a pretty unique organization because we are nonprofit as our tax structure, but not necessarily in our approach to the work. We actually have social enterprise businesses and impact programs and strategic thought leadership initiatives all rolled together into one organization. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about each of those today. And I'm hopeful that if I try this again, I will be able to share with you. There we go. Okay, can everybody see this? Great. Okay, it's not going to work exactly like I might have wanted it to because it's now a PDF, but such is life. Okay, so this is a little bit of what I started talking about. What makes us different as a nonprofit is that we embrace business principles for a social mission. When we were created 15 years ago by Dr. Gary Michelson, he had social enterprise in mind, this idea of both bringing innovation and science to bear to help pets, but also bringing commerce to bear to help pets. People spend money on their pets, and we would love to harness some of that to give back to helping pets in need. So that is what we do. So we have a private operating foundation structure, which is actually quite rare in the nonprofit world. And we run a whole range of businesses. We intentionally recruit people with a strong background from other fields. So scientists for our research programs, and HR professionals for our volunteer program, and those kinds of things, so that we can be the best at what we want to do and use that expertise to create programs and resources that can benefit other animal welfare organizations. If you think about our impact programs, as I mentioned, we bucket them into 3 categories that you see here. So we have our social enterprises, there are 2 of those. We have our philanthropic investments, and then we have our strategic initiatives. And the goal, what brings all of this together, is that we think that pets and people are better together, and so we want to champion pets at every point they intersect with our society. And I think there's more recognition now than ever that pets intersect in a lot of areas of our society where they maybe haven't gotten as much credit. You're starting to hear a lot more about pets in workplaces. You're starting to hear a lot more about pets in housing, pets in healthcare settings, pets in travel situations, public transit. There are all of these places where, now that pets are a more integral part of our lives, we want to bring our pets, and where therefore we need programs and services to support pets and people being together. These are our 2 social enterprises. And Isabel, can you keep an eye on the chat window and let me know if there are any questions? Because I don't have it up.
Yeah, we'll do.
I don't know how to do that without throwing myself off here, so I won't even try. So these are our 2 social enterprises. On the left, you see the Michelson Found Animals Registry. This is a B2B2C business model. The B2B portion of it is that we scanners to shelter partners around the country. We have probably between 800 and 1,000 clients that range from very small rescues to very large shelters who buy chips and scanners from us. And then as a free service, we provide the registry. So we allow them to upload their data to us, and then we maintain communication with pet owners over time, both to help them get their lost pet home, but also to provide them with pet care resources and information. So the 2C of that B2B2C model is the pet parents, and there are millions of pets and owners in our registry, and growing every month. Some months we added about 100,000 people to the database. Important to know is that this is essentially a technology business. The chips and scanners here are a commodity. These are passive RFID microchips, but the registry is really complicated because we have to draw in that data from hundreds of animal welfare organizations on different systems. We have to maintain it. We have to provide the ability for pet owners to update it online. We built this intentionally to be very self-serve because since it's a free product, we wanted to keep the cost manageable. And then we have to be able to alert people when their pet gets lost, also provide them with the functionality to transfer pets to a new owner, etc. So it's actually almost 1 million lines of custom code on top of a NetSuite base. So this thing on the left side of the slide here on social enterprises, for some other organizations, this might be their only product or their only program, and it's just one of ours. But that is one of our biggest programs. That's our national program. It's a technology social enterprise. If you flip over to the right, Adoptin Shop is our local retail B2C adoption centers. So we consider this retail adoption centers. We pull animals from local shelter partners in Southern California. The vast majority of the pets that come to us are from municipal shelter partners. They do stay with us at our facility until they get adopted. That is a very, very expensive endeavor. We pull almost half of our intake is underage kittens that have to go through our nursery and foster homes before they're even eligible for adoption. More and more, the dogs that need help at the shelters are older or have some sort of medical or behavioral issue. So sometimes they have a longer stay with us or that they require more care. It's very expensive. So to help us offset some of those costs in our 2 locations, we offer pet retail. So dog beds, cat food, everything you could need for your pet. And then in our larger location, we offer doggy daycare and grooming. So that's a very B2C retail focused endeavor on Adoptin Shop. And we only have locations in Los Angeles. And that both serves the mission of getting pets adopted. Last year, we did over 2,000 adoptions, but also gives us the expertise that we bring to LEAP around retail and interactions with pet owners and what kinds of products and services they like. Moving on to our philanthropic investment bucket, we think that there needs to be a different way of spaying and neutering pets. So top left is the Michelson Prize and Grants. We invest in scientific research to try to develop a non-surgical sterilant for dogs and cats. This is particularly important because in the sheltering world right now in the United States, managing reproduction of outdoor or loosely owned cats is a huge challenge. And having a product that could be as simple as giving a vaccination that would provide long-term contraception or sterilization would be a game changer. We have been working on that program. We launched it in 2009. Our lead product, and we have a portfolio of products and programs, our lead product has just now gotten through what is sort of the equivalent of a safety study with really good data in cats. So this has been on a pharmaceutical scale timeline. We're very excited to move to the next step. It's one of the other things that makes us different because of our funding model and the generosity of Dr. Michelson. We can make these very long-term bets and sustain funding programs for a decade plus before they come to fruition. So the other things that we do in this category, of course, Isabel did a great job talking about the Leap Venture Studio, so I won't talk about that. In the animal welfare world, we do grant making. We do that both locally in Los Angeles, where we tend to focus on programs that reduce intake to shelters. So that would be surrender prevention, which is helping people who can't access affordable veterinary care or who need some other sort of help. It could be temporary food support. It could be help fixing a fence. They need help to keep a pet in the home. And we also do spay-neuter funding to a variety of groups that's focused in Southern California. Nationally, we've done some challenge fundraising to help all kinds of animal welfare organizations raise money for whatever is going to increase life saving in their local community. And then strategic initiatives, and I'll flip to another screen for you for a second. We just launched something that we're calling the Pet Inclusive Housing Initiative on January 28th. We did some detailed research in partnership with the Human Animal Bond Research Initiative last year. We surveyed landlords, owner-operators, and renters, residents all over the country, and we asked them questions about pets in rental housing. The reason we did this is that we know that depending on which survey you believe, 50% or more, up to 2/3 of US households have a pet, and many households are in rental housing. And when there are pet restrictions in rental housing, it can lead to a few things. It can lead to people having to give up pets that they already have, or it can lead to people not adopting a first pet or adopting another pet because they can't have the pet in their housing. So our goal here is to really work with the multi-family housing industry and shift the supply side of the equation because demand is already there. So I will stop sharing for a second and share a different, actually, hang on a second, let's see if this works. Can you guys see that pet inclusive housing screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, okay, so this is the website. If you go to petsandhousing.org, you can find it, and I would really love anybody out there who owns buildings or knows people who are in the multi-family industry. We'd love to talk to them. This has downloads and data. So for example, the statistic that over 90% of owner-operators, even those without pets, agree that pets are important members of the family, which is great, except that there's this discrepancy. You know, 76% of owner-operators say that they're pet-friendly, but 72% of residents say that pet-friendly housing is hard to find. And the thing that's different between those two is I think that most owner-operators say they're pet-friendly if they allow any pets, but the reality is that most pet-friendly buildings have some kind of restriction on breed or weight, et cetera. So this is fun work that we're doing that we're really excited about. We are speaking at the National Apartment Association in June and working on a lot of policy work. And this is something that we're excited to keep doing as we go forward to make sure that, that housing is available to everybody who wants to have a pet. Tied to that, back to the deck, there's something called the Better Neighbor Project. As if you read the news, you will know that homelessness is a big issue in California and particularly in our hometown of Los Angeles. So that's something that we work on in a variety of ways. We work with the local government agencies as well as with nonprofits to try and figure out, and we're still early stages of this. I cannot say that we have great solutions yet, but we're trying to at least coordinate that when someone who is living on the street wants to come into a housing situation, we want there to be pet-friendly options. And right now, while there are some pet-friendly options in Los Angeles, there are not enough, because the estimates are that anywhere from a quarter to a third of the people that are homeless have a pet. And of course, they don't want to have to choose between a roof over their head and their animal, who may have been their only source of companionship and comfort for some time now. So there's not enough supply to meet the demand, and there's not good coordination amongst the agencies so that the social services folks know if someone has a pet, this is where I can send them. So these are the kinds of things that we are doing that we categorize as strategic initiatives, and that we are using to really try and make an impact for pets and peoples well beyond what happens in the four walls of the shelter. These are just a few stats. We've done a ton of adoptions, funded over 30 scientific research projects. Most of those have been at major universities. Some of them have been at biotech companies and startups. And as you can see, we raise and give away a lot of money. Relevant to those of you who may want to participate in LEAP, and particularly the Venture Studio, these are the resources that are useful, have been useful to the companies that have worked with us in the past. Firstly, because we have a high volume of cats and dogs that come through our facilities, we have built-in test subjects. So if you have a product or service and you want to see how dogs and cats feel about it, we've done taste testing for people before. We've done cheek swabs for people before so that they can get data for various products. And our two retail locations do have very different footprints and different demographics. So we're able to give you information or see how a product sells and resonates with folks in different situations here in Los Angeles. And then if you were a company who wanted to have a location in Los Angeles, we know this community, we love this community, you know, everything from the intricacies of zoning for pet-related businesses in Los Angeles, which is a huge pain in the tuchus, to which city council members are the most pet-friendly, etc. And if you haven't had the pleasure yet, we do host pet industry events in our office from time to time, and we are happy to support that for organizations in the community. Nationally, as I talked about, we have millions of pets and owners in our registry database, and we do communicate with them regularly. So we know a lot about what they like and what they don't like, and we have the opportunity to get offers in front of them. That's not something that we can make available to everyone, but it is something that we do for our LEAP companies. And because we communicate with them often, we can talk to you a bit about, you know, sort of what's going on in email, what kind of offers people want, what kind of offers people respond to. Again, this is in a very shelter-specific audience. And of course, we have our website and our social following as well. Plus, of course, our network and our internal team that we are happy to deploy for our studio companies and to make connections for academy companies where it makes sense. This is also one of the reasons that we work closely with Mars and the kinship division. It's been very complementary. You will see that nothing on this slide talks about veterinary. Mars has the deep expertise in veterinary. Nothing on this slide talks about pet food, other than that our dogs and cats are happy to test it, albeit in a not terribly controlled setting. So it's very complementary. The things that we do, we have very deep relationships with shelters. We have very deep relationships with pet owners in a slightly different way than Mars does. And this is why we've been such great partners, is because we bring different strengths to the table. This is just a little bit about our pet owner community based on some of the surveying that we have done. And you can see that although millennials are, if you see a lot of the surveys out there, the largest pet owning demographic, our audience skews a bit older, and we have some data to indicate that from a purchase perspective, the audience may still skew a bit older. And that's a sampling of who we are and what we're about, and I'm happy to take questions if anybody has them.
There's one question in the from the chat box going back to the Better Neighbor project. Patricia was wondering if the stat of 1/4 to 1/3 of homeless people having pets, is that specific to Los Angeles?
It is specific to California. I don't know how that looks, for example, in New York City. It is from the community surveys that we do here in several cities in California.
Great, thank you. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. You can also chime in and take yourself off mute if you'd like to ask Aimee directly.
Aimee, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
So let's say I'm a side with Kinship Everybody, but worked with Aimee and Isabel for about a year now. If I'm a startup that is interested in working with you, what's the best way to engage with you or to get to know you, that kind of stuff? And how do you look at assessing a partnership opportunity?
Well, there are a few ways to do it. I mean, the best way to start with is you can email Isabel or me, and Isabel's contact information is available. I'm not great about answering Slack messages in a timely fashion. It's not a platform that we use at Found Animals, so it's not something that I'm on all the time. So you can reach out to us and let us know sort of what you have in mind, and we're always happy to have a quick chat. What I will say is that from a bandwidth perspective, in terms of accessing our audience, we guard that pretty jealously so as not to overwhelm folks. So we are really going to screen it through, is it going to be win-win for our audience and for what you want to do, and also on brand for us? And then, we participate in a lot of the community events and the conferences. We're always happy to chat there. And for very specific partnerships, then, Isabel and I will pass you on to our marketing team or whoever makes the most sense. And I just was on a phone call prior to this with somebody who wanted some advice about how to approach a few things in the sheltering community. And so those are the kinds of things that if you guys have questions, we're happy to schedule a webinar and make sure that you get the info that you need.
Great, and we got another question in the chat from Kimberly about what I'm guessing the LEAP programs, what's best for an idea stage startup company. So I'd say the LEAP Venture Academy, which is hosting the webinar that you're on right now, is the best place to start. So the LEAP Venture Academy is free programming all year round for any stage startup. And there's more information that I can share, so you feel free to reach out to me. I'm also going to put the Slack invitation in the chat right now, and feel free to join that channel and engage with other startups.
And Asad, do you maybe want to talk about what we look for, or what is the distinction between a company that's a great fit for the Academy versus the companies that we invite to the studio?
Yeah, I think that we tend to, as we that's my dog. Sorry, Jackson is barking because he knows I'm talking too well. As we become done this a couple of times, what it looks like is more and more the companies that join the Leap Venture Studio are ones that have a product in the market with traction, with revenue, and that's usually the minimum. And from there, we're looking at how unique the product is, how scalable it is, how impactful it's going to be on the pet care market. And then I think the biggest thing we look for is the team and their experience, and whether or not we want to work with them in the long term and whatnot. For the Academy, it's really anybody who has an idea all the way up to, you could have a product in the market with traction. We've had a lot of people who come to us to get advice, to get connections, to pitch get access to our kind of bigger network. We are trying to build this community to help each other. And so recommend you guys get as involved as you can. And I'm going to go take care of my dog right now.
So I see a few questions in the chat. So Jessica asked, for the shelter pet acquisition market, where do you see the most financial growth potential? Okay, so Jessica, I know what your business is, and so I don't know if you're asking this with respect to what you're doing or in general. What I will say in general is that shelters are always constrained for resources, particularly the municipal shelters that handle the highest volume of animals. So they are a type of customer that is always going to be cost conscious, and that sometimes makes it challenging to sell things to them. So I would say that in terms of places to start or places where you could see the easiest conversion, if not maybe the biggest volume, that would be the private shelters, because they tend to have bigger budgets and more staff and are able to do more innovative and progressive things more quickly. Because at the very large end of the scale, municipal shelters, they're often drastically under-resourced, and same thing at the very small end of the scale with rescues, they often are essentially all volunteer organizations. I don't know if that answered your question. Okay, in general, yeah. So I would say that the B2B market in animal sheltering can be really challenging. The places where the organizations actually have profitability that maybe they are able to then spend on products and services are some of the low-cost veterinary clinics are finding ways to offer affordable service and also have a good business. So that's interesting and a much needed niche in the market. So the question about, do you get too many software startups? No, actually, we would always love to see more software startups that are focused on tech that's related to animals in whatever way. So bring it on, please. Assad, nod with me. More software, as much as we can get, please. All right, Shireen. Got it. Okay, so you're taking pet food samples to homeless people. That's a great idea. We usually do have samples available, actually. So you can ask at the front counter. It kind of depends on which food company we're working with at any given time, but we do usually have the little sample bags. And also coordination of food supplies is one of the things that our in-house program coordinator for our homelessness program does. So we have a couple of ways that we're helping there. And then Shireen had a comment about landlords accepting pets and in some cases more pets. So I want to talk about this since we have a minute just for a little bit, which is owner operators are in business and they have a right to have a business and to have a profitable business. And so the approach that we're taking for this is how can we make this concept of pet inclusive housing win-win-win? Win for the residents and their pets, win for the owner operators who are trying to run a business, and win for the communities. And there are definitely ways to do that. And we actually very firmly believe that it's good for business of an owner operator to accept pets and to not have breed restrictions or weight restrictions or, you know, unreasonable restrictions to only one animal, etc. All of that said, we have to make that easy for them to do, and we have to understand their perspective, which is if you are an owner operator and you've had a terrible experience with damages, or if you had a terrible experience with one resident's pet biting another resident's child, or if you've had a horrible experience where, you know, residents in your building are getting really testy with each other over their pets, that's the kind of thing that they are real estate people. They are not necessarily pet professionals. And so our approach is to give them the tools, the templates, ideas of pet agreements, ideas about how to set community expectations, the things that will allow them to have a pet inclusive community that works for everyone. Landlords are pet owners too, and they tend to love pets. It's just that when they've had bad experiences that either hurt them financially or hurt their business in some other way that they don't feel equipped to solve, the easiest thing for them to do is to put in restrictions. And I get why they do that. And again, this is going to be a long-term, multi-year project on our part to really forge those relationships with the multifamily housing industry and figure out what are their concerns, provide them with the data and provide them with the tools so that they can get comfortable changing their policies and see that it works. Off of soapbox.
This is Patricia. I'm wondering if you have any success stories that you could share now, like so far in your conversations with owner operators.
Around pet inclusive housing? Sure. So there's actually a group, and this was not something that we initiated. This was initiated through a different group that we partner with that actually has a tool to help landlords screen incoming applicants with pets. But it was a landlord in Florida who has, I think, about 3,000 units under management. And they decided to remove breed restrictions in all of their units. and they actually saw their pet related revenue go up 40% in the first year. So people were willing to pay the pet rent, happily pay the pet rent for whatever breed of dog. And I think that's also one of the things where it's going to be what happens that I think landlords don't understand the dynamics is when you have restrictive policies, people go get ESA certificates. And when people have an emotional support animal, they don't have to pay pet rent. So again, the actual financial benefit to the landlord is probably to remove breed and size restrictions, have logical pet community guidelines and rules about pets in your building, and charge reasonable deposits and pet rent, and everybody wins.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Do you know the name of the tool?
The tool is called Pet Screening.
All right. Thanks so much.
Dan, do you support software startups with grants? No, we do not. So for Found Animals, the only mechanism by which we invest in for-profit startup companies is LEAP. So through the pitch competitions in the academy and through the studio, where those are equity investments, that is how we invest in for-profit startups. And our grant making is entirely to other nonprofit organizations or to researchers who are doing research on that non-surgical sterile project. Sorry, but apply to LEAP.
Hey, Aimee, I have a question. Can you talk a little bit about the culture at MFA and your team that's there, how big the organization is, and also the importance of, for you and for others, diversity and inclusion?
Sure. So that is a great question. We are almost 90 on staff across all of our programs, and we are almost 900 active volunteers who last year gave us about 60,000 hours of service, which would be the equivalent of having a much bigger staff. So we're very grateful to them because we could not do what we do without them. We consider ourselves entrepreneurial. We have a very fast-paced culture. We like to try things. We like to fail quickly if we're going to fail. We really value innovation. We want to hear from everybody on our organization about what they think. And then of course you have to have a decision-making process, but we are, I would say, a very collaborative and a very fun environment. If I walked you around our office with this camera, you would see we have these huge gates that are built into all of our cubicles because we designed the office around having dogs in the office. And we didn't want to have all these sort of ugly, mismatched one-off dog gates. So we literally built the office, all of the offices that have doors that close have Dutch doors. So you can have a top that's open and a bottom that's closed for pets. And then all of the cubicle pods have these really cool and good-looking sliding gates so that you can create dog areas in the little pods. So that's what it's like to work at Found Animals, and it's part of what contributes to our success. We really put a premium on innovation, and we really put a premium on collaboration, which is why you see us having partners as broad as Mars for LEAP, as broad as the Human Animal Bond Research Institute for some of our pets and housing work. We did something with NBC last year. I'm in conversations with Nextdoor right now. We really like to kind of sit at all of those intersections in animals and society. And because, we think of ourselves as Switzerland, we like to work constructively with everybody. So constant learning, constant experimentation, lots of innovation, try to have fun. Don't wear black pants in my office because you will leave covered in dog hair. All right, I saw many startups from all parts of the world in this year's cohort. Did it mean they all flew to the US to pitch, please? No, actually, we do virtual pitches for the studio. Asad, do you want to talk a little bit about that, how the application process works?
Yeah, so for the studio, applications will open up in September, and we will accept applications until about the end of October. And then from there, we will whittle it down to, say, the top 20 or 25 that we will invite to pitch, but it's all virtual pitches because we don't want the bias of people who can make it to LA. But you'll be pitching, if you make it to that stage, you pitch to a room of about, 10 or 12 people, maybe 15 people. And from there, we whittle it down to our top 7 that we invite into the cohort. And so, yeah, I would say last year we had about 130, applicants that completed the application. Of those, I think something like a quarter were international companies, and this year we had 2 of the 7 that were international that came into the studio. Don't quote me on those stats, but yeah.
Yeah, that sounds roughly accurate. So for Shireen, again, yes, there are other things we talk to landlords about. It depends on what their issue is. So some landlords think that they can't find insurance unless they breed discriminate, in which case we can direct them to insurers that don't breed discriminate. Some landlords have misconceptions about what damages pets actually cause or what liability pets actually cause. And so we're able to sometimes address their concerns without it being financial. But we are also very sensitive to the idea that they are in business. They have paid a lot of money for this asset that they now own, and they need to earn some kind of a return on that asset. And that if we sort of walk in with the finger wagging, telling them what they need to do, that we probably are not going to make many friends and not get very far.
Aimee, how can you, this is something I learned having gotten engaged with you guys, how busy it gets at certain times of year because of the influx of cats and dogs and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. So any of you on the phone may not realize this, but there's actually such a thing as kitten season. It's sort of like the holiday season. It's cuter, but less fun. Cats are seasonal breeders. And so I should say historically, climate change may be transforming this in a way that's not useful, but cats are seasonal breeders. And so they tend to get pregnant in the very early spring, give birth in the late spring and into the summer. And so all of these kittens that either the mother something has happened to the mother and they are now orphaned, or well-meaning people see a litter of kittens, usually when they are too young to run away. The mom has run away because she doesn't like people. So she heard you coming before you ever saw her and ran off. You now see the kittens, think that the kittens are abandoned, scoop them up and take them to the shelter. Itty bitty kitties need to be fed around the clock, and the shelters don't have the resources to do that. So if they don't have a foster immediately available, those kittens are euthanized often on the same day that they come in. Otherwise, they would suffer. They would basically starve to death and get cold. It's a terrible situation. So a couple of things, number one, there is kitten season. And so in your local community, coming up in the spring and summer, if you want to foster or volunteer, your local shelter, essentially anywhere in the United States, would love help with kittens. Number two, if you come across a litter of kittens that you think is abandoned, don't immediately assume that. If they are warm and they appear to have full bellies, what is likely is that mom just didn't want to hang around while you walked by. Come back in a few hours, and if the kittens still appear to be warm and have full bellies, you probably want to work with your local shelter to figure out how you can get mama and the kittens together versus separating the kittens and the mom and creating a situation where you take the kittens to the shelter thinking that they're going to get help, but the shelter may not actually have the resources to support them. So it could be not the outcome that you were hoping for. Here in Los Angeles, we had, about 9,000 orphan kittens come in just to our city shelters, which is just one of our big shelter systems here. So it creates a huge burden for the shelters and then groups like ours to try and get them all into foster homes and bottle feed them and do all the things that you need to do to save them. If the kittens are taken to a no-kill shelter, then they would be okay, right? Well, let's talk about this for a second. So the concept of a no-kill shelter is, it's not that shelters decide to be no-kill or not, typically. Often what happens is the amount of resources and then the amount of support that they get in the community is what determines whether or not a shelter is no-kill. And even no-kill shelters, the benchmark for no-kill is saving 90% of the animals. So what people don't realize is the shelters don't have enough resources, even sometimes no-kill shelters, to handle all of the animals that the community brings to them. And the shelter's not out there creating kittens. We, the community, are creating kittens because we don't sterilize our cats. or because we move and leave our cats behind, or whatever it is. So all shelters, whether they're no-kill or not, really do need the community support with things like kitten fostering, trap, neuter, return, etc., to be able to provide a live positive outcome for all the pets in their care. So yes, some shelters are no-kill shelters that would be able to handle kittens. The city of Los Angeles is super close to no-kill. We end up at an 88, 89% live release rate, but we still don't have the ability to provide a live outcome for 100% of the kittens. And what it takes to provide a live outcome for most of those 9,000 kittens is an insane amount of work and stress for the staff at the shelter and the rescue group. So even though we're flirting with no-kill, it's still not a good situation, and we need community support to solve the problem. So I think that kind of answers your question and kind of is me getting on my soapbox again. Okay, I see a couple more coming through. Okay, so Yesenia, I'm gonna come back to your question about career. How often is the female founder boot camp offered? Is a team required to participate? Does the company have to have their product ready, or could it be in a prototype stage? So I'm going to start from the sort of back to the front. So in the boot camp last year, we had companies at all stages. We had people who were at an idea stage, but that did not have a product out in the market. We had people who had a product out in the market and had revenue. So it was really a range. What they had in common was female founders, not necessarily stage of the product or type of the product. We did have solo founders, as well as founders who had co-founders or who had teams and organizations. And how often it is offered is something that we are still working out. Last year was the first time that we did it. And so it was we're going to try it and see how it goes. And it went great. So certainly the intention is to offer it again, but we haven't worked out the details yet. So if you want to be among the first to know, join the Slack channel and go to the LEAP website and sign up for our newsletter, because that is where we will be announcing any future versions of the bootcamp. And announcements are hopefully coming soon. Let's see. Okay. Virtual pitch competitions. We have discussed virtual pitch competitions. And again, the calendar for LEAP for 2020 is coming soon. Asad, do you want to talk a little bit about pitch competitions and kind of philosophically where we're at on that?
Yeah, sure. So, as a bunch of you know, we hosted about 4 pitch competitions over the last 12 months, and we're trying to assess whether they worked for us. And so I think we are kind of thinking through, at least from our perspective, how best to utilize our resources and mobilize our community and get the most impact for the people who are taking part in the pitch competition. So we are leaning towards doing one virtual pitch competition later this year. And so Dan and otherwise everybody else will let you know where we stand, but that's kind of where we're going right now.
So I'll come back to Yesenia's questions about what helped me to decide to pursue this type of career. So I had always loved animals, and I was that kid. We had dogs, we had cats, we had rabbits, horses, goats, snakes, gerbils, every pet known to humankind practically. And I initially had wanted to be a veterinarian. And at that point I wanted to be a large animal vet because horses were cooler to me than dogs and cats. But then I realized how much hard physical labor that was, and that you get stepped on, you get kicked, you get bitten. It can be really gross. So I went and got a science degree instead. I did work in research and development. I did then go on and get my MBA and was working for the Boston Consulting Group. And I had actually been volunteering for an animal rescue group, but really never thought that this would be a career. And just, sometimes the universe nudges you in a direction for a reason. I had been volunteering for a health and human services organization here in Los Angeles. It had a social enterprise model. It trained people that were coming either out of homelessness, out of prison, off of welfare, whatever it was, helped train them for jobs, and then had a temp agency to help people get their first job. And so I was doing volunteering, helping people write their resumes and doing mock interviews. And the executive director of that organization became a friend and a mentor. He had left the world of bond finance to run this organization and said to me at one point, you should really consider doing something like this. We need more people like you. It's not that often that somebody with your background in education and your career makes the time to consistently volunteer. You clearly have the heart for this. At that point in time, I wasn't yet ready to hear it, but about a year and a half later, I finally burned out on the consulting lifestyle, and just stars aligned, and I came across the executive search for the role I have now. What I will say though is that risk tolerance, or willing to take a risk, is really important, because at that point in time, I was deciding between leaving a partner track position at the Boston Consulting Group or leaving to be employee number one at an animal welfare nonprofit startup that nobody had ever heard of, with this billionaire that pretty much nobody had ever heard of. And if you want your friends and family to think that you are crazy, tell them that you are leaving partner track at BCG to go start an animal welfare nonprofit. They don't get it. So it was not an easy decision, but it was a decision to follow my passion, and I've never regretted it, and it's all worked out. So 12 years later, my 12-year anniversary is in the month of March. I can say that I'm glad I did it, but at the time, it did not look like a sure thing. So I guess some of my advice would be, sometimes, you know, great opportunities come in risky packages. Let's see. Okay, so Louisa had a question about Adoptin Shop and how we choose products. So it's like a lot of retailers. You know, we have a team. It's a small team because we're only a couple of locations, and we think about, what do pet parents need? You know, we're not as big as a PetSmart or a Petco big box store, so we have to have a more limited selection. So we think about, what do people need, and what do we think is going to set them up for success with their newly adopted animal. So for example, dog crates are something that we care a lot about. Collars and leashes and harnesses are something that we care a lot about. Litter boxes and litter are something we care a lot about, because if you're adopting a cat, you want the cat to use the litter box and not your potted plants. You know, that's something that's really important for having a positive relationship. So we carry a lot of products that are related to that. And then, you know, folks on my team, they go to Super Zoo and they walk the show and they see what's out there. And then we track our sales data. And I can tell you that at our 2 different locations, which have different footprints, different sort of demographics and traffic patterns, one is in a mall in one part of town, another is in a freestanding location in another part of town. And the preferences and what sells through at both locations are different. So we're constantly watching our sales data and then refining our choices. And sometimes it happens that we go to a show and see something that we love and we bring it in and it doesn't sell and we have to discount it and then donate whatever is left over. And then other times we'll notice a category is popping that is not something that we had really thought about, but it's something that people really want. One of the ones that doesn't always make sense to me and is really hard to get right is dog clothes. And we don't offer a lot of them. People really want them. People ask us for that all the time when they come into the store. But the challenge is predicting fashion, even in the doggy world, is really tough. And there's so many sizes and so many colors. And so that's an example of one that is a category where people want stuff, but it's just really a big inventory risk and a big challenge for us to carry things. So we don't, like, we'll do one line of dog sweaters or one line of raincoats in the winter, and we'll do a handful of costumes at Halloween, but we don't really stock a lot of things in that category. Versus, you know, collars and leashes is people sometimes like to express their fashion through collars and leashes, and that's a little bit easier for us to keep in stock, okay, different colors and different patterns, and to do seasonal things in collars and leashes, if that makes sense. Same thing with food. You know, the trends in food are all around, you know, different types of protein and grain-free and raw and frozen and those kinds of things. So we carry a ton of food. Food is the thing that often keeps, food and litter are the things that keep people coming back to pet stores because it's a recurring purchase. Now, all pet retail is challenged by things moving online, and that includes us. But food is something that most retailers really have to invest in carrying a fair number of lines and really having an educated staff, because pet parents care about that a lot. So food and treats are something that we carry a lot of. All right, hopefully we've got the Slack channel issue worked out. Okay, program concept for the nonprofit. So I can't take credit for it. Dr. Michelson, who was our founder and funder, had created Found Animals in 2005 and was literally running it from his kitchen table until I came on board in 2008. He's an incredible human being. You can read his bio on our site, and there's press that comes out about him and his philanthropy every so often. We are only one of several nonprofits that he funds or that are part of his organization. And he had a list. He had a long list of things he wanted to try. So my job was to take his ideas and bring them to reality. And then once we brought a bunch of his ideas to reality and sort of thought about what was going on, then I've had the privilege of going back to him at times and saying, hey, you know, pets and housing, we really want to do something there, etc. But he was already steeped in it and had great ideas for what he wanted to do and a really strong sense of the values for the organization that he wanted. And I've just had the honor of executing his vision. All right. If there aren't any other questions, okay, what advice do you have for someone who is looking to change careers into the animal welfare field? This is a really great question, and I get this frequently. What I would say is, well, I'll give you a little bit of the landscape of the animal welfare field, and then I would say you have to think about what can you bring to the organizations that exist, how can you meet their needs? So as we've talked about, there are shelters, and there are municipal shelters that are actually part of city and county organizations. And then there are private shelters that are private nonprofits, and sometimes they have a city or county contract, but they're not a city or county agency. And then there are rescue groups. And so those organizations, shelters are always hiring. It's a matter of looking in your community at what is the structure of sheltering, and is your community one that's served by a municipal or by a private, and do you have the interest and desire to be a municipal employee, because that's got its whole own system of how you get your foot in the door. And often in sheltering organizations, there's an expectation that you are going to kind of come in more junior and learn the ropes, learn the operations, and work your way up. So a lot of people that are now senior leaders in animal welfare, at the point at which they decided they wanted to join animal welfare, took a step back in order to get a role and then moved up. So that is something to consider. And then if you look nationally, there are the national organizations like the Humane Society of the United States, the ASPCA, Maddie's Fund, Best Friends. Those are the ones that are really the big hitters at the national level. And again, they're always hiring. And the thing to think about there is kind of, well, where are they based? Like the ASPCA is based in New York City. Many of their roles are out of New York. Is that somewhere you want to live? Best Friends is based in Kanab, Utah. They have a ton of staff and they're always hiring and they do amazing work. But again, the mothership is in Kanab. Do you want to live in Kanab? So then there are those considerations. And to think about, if you research what people are doing and if you look at their job boards, you'll get a sense of how you could think about, do my skills fit this? And do I want to be in one of these organizations? Another thing I'll say, just fair warning, animal welfare doesn't pay very well. So if you are currently, let's just for an example, a program manager at a for-profit company, and you want to go into animal welfare, you are probably not going to make as much as you're making now, because it's nonprofit, and B, animal welfare is not one of the best funded sectors of nonprofit. So eyes wide open. This is not the field that you're going to get rich in. Now, some of you who are having animal welfare startups or for-profit pet care startups, you may have a better shot at this if you're willing to deal with all the risk and all the long hours between here and there. But the animal welfare field is not somewhere that you come to make retirement money. Remote kitten adoption is challenging just because of shipping them when they're so little. We do transports between our location and other locations. And yes, you can bring your dog to work, which, is a benefit. I took a pay cut. I took a 30% pay cut when I came into animal welfare, and I've never regretted it, because having my work be aligned with my passion and being able to walk my own dog was worth a lot to me. And I suspect that all of you who are on the phone are more like me, maybe, than somebody who is gonna need to maximize value. So I see, you know, there's transport programs and volunteers driving. We absolutely, you know, all of those things are things that we do. Really, the bottleneck for us in terms of saving kittens is having enough foster homes that are willing to bottle feed tiny baby kitties around the clock. And I think we're almost at the end of our time. So Isabel, Assad, any, Kimberly's question. I have a nonprofit and a for-profit company. They're both in startup stages. You're very brave. I want to know if you have mentor programs for founders that don't have a clue. I'm gonna toss that one to Assad.
So I would recommend, so I think Leap Venture Academy, especially, well, I guess, assuming that you're a nonprofit and for-profit or in the animal or companion animal space, you know, I think Leap Venture Academy is the right place for you to engage with people in our Slack channel. There's, you know, I hold office hours on a regular basis. Aimee holds office hours every once in a while. Isabel is available as well. And then people on our Slack channel. I think if you have questions, if you need mentorship, we have dozens and dozens of people out there that would be willing to help you out, including probably some people on this call. Happy to chat with you about, you know, exactly what you're looking for and see if I can connect you with other people as well.
Okay, because I think I am on your Slack channel. Is Ken your Slack channel? Because I am registered. I mean, I am on that channel.
On the kinship one? Sorry, can you repeat your question?
I was wondering, is Ken your Slack channel? Because I am on that Slack channel, and I do try to, you know, reach out and ask questions. I guess I'm not that good at the technology of how to operate it as well.
Yeah, I think we're all still kind of figuring out how to interact with each other best on Slack.
Okay.
But feel free to ping me directly if on there and post things and tag me, and I can see if we can get some conversation started.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So I think we're just about at the end of the call. Aimee, your screen is still sharing also. But thank you all for joining this call. If you're interested in learning more about Michelson Found Animals, I recommend joining our newsletter. So if you go to our website, foundanimals.org, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter to keep engaged with our organization. Again, for LEAP, we also have a newsletter on our website, and the Slack channel is a great place to get updates about events. So thank you to Aimee for a great presentation. We'll be putting this on YouTube if you want to watch it again, and feel free to reach out to me with any other questions, and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for coming, guys.